Namaste and in la catch, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and this week's guest is Jonathan Macdonald. Now, Jonathan's a really wild and crazy guy. He's one of these multi-potentialites you might heard of. He's a nonlinear thinker. He's a CEO of Potency.world. He's a marketing sales manager for some talented people. Don't know who those are, but we'll find out. And he's the co-founder of Social Me Too, as well as being the global head of programming for Business Live Local. He's also involved voluntarily with the London, as the London coordinator for the Wellness Society for the Wellness Society International. And I think you'll really enjoy the dive we're going to take today. Quite unexpectedly, you'll find out. Jonathan, glad to have you.
Glad to be here. That, you see, that's what's on my LinkedIn. Actually, you missed out the bit because on my LinkedIn profile at the bottom, I've got a little smiley devil face, obscenely expensive little smiley devil face, which just cracks me up every time I see it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you could have just said he's this guy and let people, because with all those titles don't mean nothing.
I know, but see, I totally agree with you. Titles really don't mean anything. Identity really doesn't mean anything. However, you know, we have these ways of framing things that we kind of need data for, right? And so this gives kind of a playing ground or a platform to jump from. And obviously, we're going to go in a totally different direction. So let's go there. Back in the beginning, when you were first, and I know there's some events that happened in your life. We're going to get into those that, you know, those are the things that are really going to be strikingly interesting, I think.
Carry on.
And so in the beginning, though, when you were younger, what kinds of things kind of clued you in that there was more to life than what you were seeing, that there was another, maybe multiple worlds and inside that you began to become aware of?
So, and I saw you asking this question of your other guests whilst quickly researching before I came on. So, as a result of one thing, another thing became important, and as a result of that thing, another thing seemed to be connected but wasn't, and that's linked to a third thing.
So are we talking about the Internet of Things?
Well, I suppose literally, yeah.
Or is that the Internet of Things?
Well, but basically, why would you ever think, except in, I suppose, a very totalitarian regime, but why would you question your sense of perception as being different from, or in some way picking up more, shall we say? How would you know? You wouldn't know. How could you know?
Right. Well, and that's the interesting thing is kids, we don't, right? We have this expanded view or sense about ourselves or connectedness with the world that it's first notion. It's not second notion or second, you know, it's just there. And yet, how do we connect in, right? How do we validate or corroborate, let alone collaborate with others? Of course, as a kid, we're like just wanting to have fun, right? And be curious. And not everybody's curious. You and I are some of those curious sorts that dove in.
Okay, I'm going to push back on that.
All right.
I'm going to push back, and I only because, I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry, be Jonathan, all right?
Well, I will be, but I just I'm the worst kind of politician because I've got a wild brain, and I also
well, those are the most enjoyable, you know. No
okay, fair enough.
Right?
All right.
And it's okay.
Okay,
This is what we miss, is being able to just freely express, be raw, be real, be authentic,
cool.
and
As
be
long
in
as
the
you're happy
moment.
with that. Oh, by the way,
Yeah.
in case I do, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah.
It's like I
Just,
can avoid it.
uh,
Avoid
well,
it.
yeah.
Yeah,
If it
cool.
flows, I'm sure you're not going to be vulgar.
No, I may use a couple of hashtags that people will
It's
either know or
colloquial,
not.
right? It's how we talk
Yeah,
today.
exactly. So yes, about being searching out, seeking out. What was the word you used? Inquisitive. We
Being
are
curious.
curious. So yeah, so I watched a few of the other interviews, and then we talked about the education system.
Mhm.
And I was watching a post today, and it talks about hierarchies in. No, I'm reading a book actually called Rationality. It's heavy, hard reading,
Mm.
but there are hierarchies in uh, families of sea squid, in the same way as there are hierarchies throughout all of the natural kingdom, basically, and it is based on dominance and physical strength until we came
Kind of
along.
the Darwinian principle of survival of the fittest, right?
Well, that's oh dear. So that isn't Darwinian principles. That phrase is the mistaken belief that the mutation has to be something better from the perception of where we are now to what that thing will be. So it's not
Given
survival of the fittest, it's survival of whatever suits the environment.
what's best. Well, so maybe
Hmm.
in understanding the survival of the fittest, we perceive that it's a dominant trait that's necessary when the fittest might actually be what works best for the harmony of all,
Mm, quite
right?
so.
And
Yeah.
we may not get that. And of course, that's kind of why we were talking about this kind of stuff is, how do we find harmony? What are the inner workings? What are the outer workings? How do we bridge the worlds? We live half inside and half outside. What's that mean? And how do we integrate a whole being consciously in that? And this is part of what you've been able to do, and others like you and I are curious enough to explore it.
Hmm. Hmm. So, in answering your first question, because there are so many different tangents, any of which would be a life-altering. I mean, look, any decision. So you don't have to believe in the multiverse or any version of it. Just recognize that a decision gives you at least two binary options.
Mhm.
And from each binary option, other options become true or not. And so you get further and further away in divergence, and that changes a life.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. And then you got a lot of yes and no's, and then the
yeah,
maybes, right?
yeah.
And so then
So,
that takes you further into the flow.
yeah. So I'm very happy to have these of universes, whole universes just going in my mind. And um, it's like foam that you're seeing from like sponging, putting a soapy sponge behind the material, and the
Mhm.
bubbles come through the holes in the material, so they're really tiny.
Right.
That's like that. Um, but that is, as it turns out, not really that normal. So to answer your first question, there's a lot of things I can tell you about what I knew at one point and keep it that way round and then do the
Well, let's
reveal.
look at, most people look back at their childhoods and they think, okay, what were the important factors? How did I connect initially? And did I lose that connection? And if so, how do I regain it? And what's the benefit for doing so?
Okay. So I really wasn't aware of many thought, or when I say wasn't, I am no longer aware of really any memories before about 4 or 5.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of
Fundamentally,
normal.
yeah. So fundamentally, one of the these things that children say and or you're embarrassed about when you're a small child. So I wet the bed and I wore nappies until I was at least 5, and the reason for that we'll come on to later, which is what I was saying about which direction you want this story to go. So apart from that,
The most
uh,
significant direction would probably, of course, that's a, subjective,
entirely
right?
loaded. Yeah, yeah. Listen, this is the whole point. Yeah, we could go off. I hope you've got a format because I'm a tangential kind of a guy.
Well, we're
Uh,
following
tan-
it so far.
Excellent. All right. So yeah. So I am a mixed race person, but adopted by white British parents.
Mhm.
Now, in 1972, which is the year I was born, in England, we had, they're not as bad as the Ku Klux Klan, but basically the same ideology.
Mhm.
And it was a pretty racist time. It was the around the time, so Negroes and Irish people were banded together in English racism at one point. So
Hmm.
it'd say no Negroes, no Irish, no dogs outside the pubs. So that's
That
the
had to been a really harsh way
not
to
at all, not
put,
at all.
well,
Here's how unharsh it was.
all right.
I used to watch The Dukes of Hazzard.
I
The
remember
Dukes
that
of
show.
Hazzard was brilliant with a Confederate flag on the General Lee,
Right?
but there was nothing racist in that show.
Not at all.
So I love that show. But the irony, oh man, because you know, yeah. So right, where was I?
So you had something to distract yourself and enjoy life in the way that you could at the moment without all the kerfuffles from the outer world impacting you.
Well,
Um,
yeah,
which
basically,
would seem to be something that, from an outer perspective, it would be very opportunistic from those who wanted to diminish certain segments of society, let's say.
I will come back at you with this extended metaphor. So I'm mixed race, black from the racist point of view. I'm brought up by two white parents. One's a technical professor at university. The other's a professional photographer. Obviously, all of my extended family are white. The neighbourhood I live in is white. Everyone I see is white. I'm one of only two people of colour in my primary school.
So unless you look in the mirror, you're gold, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, here's the interesting thing, and this is, I'm hoping to get some contentious um, bile directed at me over this, but I haven't so far been able to get it. Excuse me a second. Sorry, beg your pardon.
Well, even in that, I didn't mean to. My intention was not to be separative. That you were still, from your point of view, you knew no difference. There
No,
was,
no.
yeah.
But what's interesting is that, so I've got a very different perspective on racism, because racism, and listen, George Floyd, all that rest, and that's just I mean, the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, both in this country. I mean, the police over here are murdering and rapists, and they haven't been police checked. There's a
I
lot
think
of bad.
there's outliers in
Yeah,
any population, no matter what it
exactly.
is, and you're going to have the aberrant behavior there. It's just how do
Yes,
we
yes.
minimize that?
So, but the thing is this, that the argument goes that because of my ethnicity, be I Mexican, black, or whatever it may be, um, that is the reason why I get pulled over. It's the reason I get searched. It's the reason I get in aggravation with. It's the reason I'm discriminated against. And it's the reason why the world is not fair to me. And I in no way ever want to ever say to anyone that that isn't true. However, what I will say is that when you grow up in a white family, the stories and the narratives about which recent history informs your family genetically, epigenetically, psychologically for generation after generation, those narratives give you a set of filters, perceptual filters
Mhm.
that we know in NLP. And so I'm one of two people of color in an area that's completely white. There are ghettos of black people here, there, and everywhere. The people in the ghettos say they're pulling me over because of my color. And I'm going, if they're pulling you over because of your color, then surely I should stand out like a sore thumb in this entirely white population and should be disproportionately, even in comparison, pulled up on. But no. And I'm 48 years later before I understand that the stories we tell ourselves inform our beliefs, inform our behaviors, and therefore inform our outcomes. But most people do not know that they have agency in these things.
Very true.
So yeah, so basically, I'm a kid. I just am. Turns out I was mad. Um,
Bad, bad, and glad, huh?
yeah. So my first record was Iron Maiden Running Free. No, it wasn't Iron Maiden. Yeah, Iron Maiden Running Free. And at the highest school, not high school, the end of primary school disco, they played Run to the Hills, and I was air drumming. I just got a chair, sat down in the middle of the dance floor, and was air drumming to it.
Uh,
And yeah, so like whatever. But the reason for that, it turns out, is about something which we can get onto later.
all right. So in that, you love how you set things up. Uh, Now, in this process, though, you've really kind of exampled that, especially with the beliefs and the agency, right? We make choices and we have so much um, genetically and nurturing, from our the bloodlines and from the current times and how we're nurtured or how we perceive the world and the information we take in as to what it's like from those things that are around us. Because it's really the only way that we can at the time.
Hmm.
However, in the curious sorts can look for it, but however, you've got that immediate experience, your nuclear family, your friends, your school, your neighborhood, and all that kind of stuff. Um, and it impacts the development. Now, in the long term, though, when you realize that, oh, wait a minute, I can choose. I don't have to fit in. And this is the thing about multi-potentialites and nonlinear thinkers. There's a different rationale at play here, whereas I'm okay with me. I don't have to fit in. And others, like your air drumming, for example,
Hmm.
right? You just sat in the middle of the floor and did your thing and you didn't care.
Hmm.
Right? And that's a freedom of expression and creativity.
It's joyful exuberance.
Exactly.
Give me an adult that can do that, because the problem is not that I was prepared to do that myself. It turns out, so I'm too old at 51 to have been called dyslexic during my education.
Right.
A lot longer down in our story that will be revealed, but that in and of itself is the difference that you see in all art. And art is any manifestation of flow. the
Mhm.
energy flows that we have, and the interfaces that we have with technology, materials, people, society, whatever it is, and you see these people floating around and just effortlessly, it's like satin
Wouldn't it be
sliding around
great if
each
we
other.
could have organizational structures like that,
Well,
right?
this is the thing. Did I ever finish that thing about the hierarchy of of sea urchins? Oh yeah. So basically, education is hierarchical.
Right.
It's very hierarchical. It's very linear. But all things that have developed us to this point have been hierarchical. Without hierarchy, you couldn't have armies. Without
It
armies, you
depends.
couldn't.
Excuse me. I agree with you on the hierarchical nature
Mm,
of it. However, there's different ways that it's explored. And one of the things that I found as a teacher here in the States and the educational system, how it's structured and the lack of the holistic view of the child from the beginning and nurturing them through a particular track in life that they're most not just adapted, most connected with, most resonant with, where you had taken the aptitude, the attitude, and the skill set and the passion that a child has for life. And you can peer into that fairly early.
hmm
On the other hand, and this is probably going to get some blowback in the Russian educational system.
and
So, and I know about this because my wife's Russian. She's a
okay.
classically trained conservatory graduate, piano teacher, and pedagogue, as well as accompanist, world class. And in their educational system, they assess the kids when they were younger or when they're young and give them a choice. She had a choice between gymnastics and piano. She chose piano. So that was her track throughout the rest of her educational life. And all of the general education, the history, the language, the um, social norms, all those kinds of things that was built around that in a very rich way. And America is not like that. And yet we're envious of the discipline of others who are. And we tend to be, to kind of want to fight with that because we want to have our we think it's free agency, and yet it comes later in life because we never had the discipline to create the uh, the method or the practice of critical thinking.
Okay. How many different ways can I unpack that?
Oh, probably a bunch. However, my goal there was just to compare two different societies and the way that
Mm.
they nurtured their youth in order for the civilization itself to evolve. And we look at it
Yes.
more from America as a time value job orientation.
Okay. I dearie me. Listen, if at any point you want to kick me off, just let me know. So here's the thing. Um, uh, Education in America, but increasingly now in the UK, is a business model based on committing people to lifelong debt for the pursuit of notionary bits of paper
It
that
eventually gets
do.
there, absolutely.
Yeah, so I've got no time for the education system in either of those examples, and I'll tell you for why. Because in the Russian example, which sounds great, it's about when do you have the ability to choose, and if it then determines an entire path, that could be seen as limiting. if you can't
Prescriptive.
change, yeah. And the American version is, you know, go to a good junior school, go to a good high school, you go to a good college, you get to a good university. If you can get Ivy League or the top 30, you're almost guaranteed to get in the door at KPMG or wherever it might be. And so everyone's beating themselves over it. There's a great TED talk about overstressed pet, no, chicken, prowler chickens. It's find the reference somewhere.
Well, you
But
remind
basically,
me, we were talking about the interviews I had with Jeffrey Mishlev some
mm,
years ago that were part of a 28-year dream come true. One of them was on thinking or on hearing voices. And to your statement, I remember as a first-year student in college, when my psychic senses got blown open, I would walk from the cafeteria. I had a job in the cafeteria. I lived in the honors dorm, which was 50 yards away. And from walking to the cafeteria to the dorm one day, I walked past students and I would hear this horrible, self-deprecating projections at self. And they were all, I would hear this, you, blah, 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 you, blah, 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 all different voices, all different kinds of self-deprecating comments, and yet all of them self-deprecating. And hearing the you, I thought it was me, right? Because I'm hearing all of this and I didn't know how to differentiate between the personal you and the general you at that time.
mm,
And so I'm hearing all of this and I'm thinking it's all about me. And it totally freaked me out to the point where I locked myself in my dorm room for 3 days and wouldn't come out until a friend of mine came over and asked, hey, was it your voice or others' voices? And at that point, I was able to make that separation.
wow. So you were hearing the internal voices of the insecurities of all the people around you.
And having my own, it made it very easy to assume that it was me.
Indeed. Because why would you understand that unless you had real mental control?
Which is
Interesting.
what I began to develop at that point. Because our minds they're just this amazing untapped tool and access to infinite intelligence that we don't even recognize yet because we're
Mm,
still too focused in the imposter syndrome, right?
mm.
Um, Now, how did you, in bridging that? Well, let's just dive in. Okay, so you later in life, you had some tremendous challenges. I mean, you had some experiences, as I recall you descriptive or describing them, of
Mm.
a series of strokes that
That was later. I'll just do them in quick order. Um, so basically, adopted as a baby,
sure
wasn't
just take
picked up.
over.
Yeah. Wasn't picked up. Well, because otherwise it's like I don't want to be laborious about the injuries because it's not about the injuries. It's
Oh,
about
I
the thinking.
totally hear it, and you're very humble in that respect, and yet it was profoundly impactful as far as your ability to recognate things.
Yes, but that's luck. So
Perhaps.
basically, yeah, well, definitely. So, first thing to happen, I'd gone through my childhood and adolescent life and early, late teenage years without any problems, massively reckless, very gregarious, started riding motorbikes, changed jobs to buy a motorbike. And had this job with a company car, and I was living at home, and so I bought this motorbike. Had these motorbikes, and really powerful sports bikes. You know, the sort of you go
Oh yeah,
like that.
my son
And
had a 1200 Ducati.
yeah. Okay, so I had the CBR 900, the Fireblade. Um, and my god, the power. Anyway, so 1996, have a motorcycle accident. Upper right side of the body there is paralyzed, including the lung. Because the lung wasn't supported, it pressed on my stomach, which meant for about 5 years I projectile vomit 3 or 4 or 5 times a day, addicted to morphine. My God, you look at the morphine problems in America at the moment. Back in 1996, I was taking enough morphine to kill 3 horses. So that was quite savage. And then the pain is so excruciating. Even now, it's just that now I've got different strategies, but it's like you're being shredded apart whilst also burned, frozen, electrocuted, and crushed. Um, and it's right in the front of your head all of the time. And the only way at the time I could picture it, the only internal representations I could make, the Death Star blowing up, planets exploding, volcanoes, all sorts of mad, crazy, murderous, terrible things. And I didn't really deal with that at all well. I'm functioning alcoholic, functioning drug addict. And when I say functioning, producing these remarkable effects as a middle manager working for, you remember when Yellow Pages was a directory, a book, that company.
Okay.
And yeah, so I'm doing all this, and it was only because of a change of focus that I stopped taking all the hard drugs, and changed my life basically. And that was because of a reframe where I went back to the hospital that had treated me, and I was volunteering for hospital radio. It's like an internal radio station for the hospital, and you see the adolescents ward, and it's the Royal National Orthopaedic Hospital, it's the European Centre for so
Okay.
you've got kids there from all over Europe, with cancers, with limbs being removed, with just scoliosis. These children are
Just about any kind of trauma you could
oh
imagine that these kids were
yeah,
examples of
yeah.
it.
And here's the thing. When I had the bike accident, it wasn't my fault, and I was going within the speed limit, honestly, my lad. But kids don't choose that sort of thing.
Right.
And so I then made it my business, because it seemed to me that people don't really understand children. I don't think they remember being them, or possibly it's not a memory system that I'm using for these skills. But basically, children don't know what they don't know. For them, it just is.
Right.
And
Right. They don't know
so,
what they can't do, so they just
yeah,
do
it
without,
just exactly.
right?
And so basically, all these volunteers would give their time, and they go up to these kids and they go, "Oh, would you like a request at the radio?" I'm like, my God, have you never spoken to a child? So I did this scripted intro. I'd buy bags of sweets. I had this posse. I had this recorder. So just a mad, awesome time. So I went from taking drugs and being really, really depressed on a
I would think
Friday.
you got
Yeah,
the feedback from the kids that was just, I would
well,
think, dealing with that, this was like a breath of fresh air for them.
absolutely. Absolutely. And so it was so funny, because I was the only, yeah, anyway. But basically they saved my life, because I was drug driving, I was drink driving, not recovering from drink driving, going out drink driving.
Hmm.
Horrifying, selfish, and I am so fortunate that I didn't kill someone. I didn't give a shit if I killed myself. I wanted to die. That's the thing. I think people that say that suicide people are taking the easy way out should maybe take a moment to think about how they'd do it themselves, and see if they're um, brave or selfish. But yeah, so
Good point.
yeah, so that experience turned me on a different path. where I started to use what I'd learned in neuro-linguistic programming to, I've written it as oh God, these things go backwards and forwards.
Right,
So I started using NLP and communication techniques,
right.
and you learn about some ideas. And
Cognitive reframing.
yeah,
The
yes,
you know, I'm kind of a cognitive scientist, and what that really means is that I look for patterns
yeah,
everywhere. And that's how we operate, is patterned
recognition.
activity, habit, thinking, all of those kinds of things. To be aware of that, and then allows you to step back from it and alter those patterns for yourself.
Yes, but only in my case after I'd had the strokes.
Mhm.
So yeah, had the
Now we're
motorcycle
back to
accident.
that again. Okay.
Yeah, so had the motorcycle accident, 6 years of horror, changed my direction, went a certain way. Then a few years after that, I fell over, broke my wrist. So I haven't got my upper right hand side. Fell over, broke my left wrist. Was in a plaster cast for 18 weeks. Then trapped the medium nerve, so I can't feel the tips of my fingers. I can't pick things up off surfaces. Just loads of, yeah, so I'm sort of, hook away. And then mother died on Christmas Eve 2003, which was an emotional blow. And then 6 strokes the year after that till 2006. And I didn't go to the doctor until the 5th one, because they just were, they're called TIAs, and it's transient something or the other for it, a
So it just seemed
temporary.
like a different moment of consciousness,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then it passed and you didn't really think about it. That's,
yeah.
I wonder how
But
many of us actually have those and don't recognize it.
well, as I now have become aware, and I used the term woke in the book I wrote before the hijacking of the word woke by the right wing as some sort of bad thing. But yeah, once I had awoken to myself, which is how I used it, I became incredibly compassionate, because I had honestly thought until, so how old, when did I know? So I only figured out that there was a difference in at the end of December 2016. I'd had an inkling in the year before, reading a couple of books. One of the books was called Seeing What Other People Cannot See, The Hidden Talents of Visual Thinkers and Differently Wired Brains.
Kind of the pre-multi-potentialite.
You read that book, I read that book. It's got some of the well-known paradigm shifters, and I'm reading about my own school days. I'm reading about my own situation.
Well, this is the thing that's really, uh, pardon me for just blurting in, those loose associators, really, you got to forgive us. Everybody that reaches this kind of, let's say, a state of understanding about their connectedness to the world and others, most of us have gone through some kind of really similar um, process or experience as youngsters,
Mm,
right? And we don't necessarily recognize it. It's almost like a rite of passage.
mm,
I wonder if that same rite of passage, as we look back and consider, reflect, embrace, forgive, would that lead us to a more natural flow of understanding ourselves and others? I'm not sure, because we don't really, this is part of why I'm having conversations with folks like you, is like,
mm.
let's explore this and see how we can benefit from each other, compare and reflect our individual growth patterns and see if there's a similarity across the board that we can honor and learn how to collaborate with from that core of empathic resonance that it produces.
Yes. And so, 3 clauses, which one am I going to go with?
Right, right. Let's start with the and.
Yes. And after I'd finished writing my book in November 2020, I read a book called The Gift of Dyslexia. And throughout my book was written about this coaching program I tried to deliver for primary age children after all my strokes, and I was giving up. I didn't think I had any life left, so I made this thing. I was volunteering, love to children, writing a book about it. And because I'm writing a book about how it is I'm able to overcome things, I'm consistently self-reflecting and looking, because obviously memory isn't real. Memory is representative, and is also subject to biases, and it's also subject to perspective. So it's interesting that if I say something and you say something different, I don't go, I go, ooh, because you've got a perspective I've not got yet.
Aren't we
But
all
that,
assimilationists in that perspective when we are open to others?
no, we are not. No, we are not. So let me read you this bit from The Gift of Dyslexia. The mental function that causes dyslexia, the irony of me reading it is not lost on me. The mental function that causes dyslexia is a gift in the truest sense of the word, a natural ability, a talent. It is something special that enhances the individual. Dyslexics don't all develop the same gifts, but they do have certain mental functions in common. Here are the basic abilities all dyslexics share. They can utilize the brain's ability to alter and create perception, the primary ability. They're highly aware of the environment. They're more curious than average. They think mainly in pictures instead of words. They're highly intuitive and insightful. They think and perceive multidimensionally using all the senses. They can experience thought as reality, and they have vivid imaginations. Now, I said that to you the first time we talked, and that's why we're now doing this. So that is a dyslexic trait. However, as I'm continuously researching, I think that it is an emergent property that is the same in neurotypical brains as in neurodivergent brains. It's just that they're using DOS and we're using, whatever the
OS.
yes, whatever. So it's the software, because someone can wander around a day thinking about their job and their boss and their girlfriend and their car insurance and their home, and each of those thoughts occurs as words or pictures or feelings, and so that is a chunk of mental energy, and so typically people think about the things they don't want rather than the things they do want.
Absolutely.
And so they don't attract. So you're saying attractive, the term attracted, there was something a phrase
Empathic
you used,
resonance.
that no, it was the one for
The assimilation.
Yes.
Well, here's how I was seeing that, in that as we experience anything, we assimilate what's in it for us. And that may be a different view. It may be a similar view. It may be a new idea, something that's been outside of our purview previously. And now that we have it, there's this natural assimilation process that perhaps we do it unconsciously initially. But as you're talking about the same hardware that we're given, and the software is actually what's malleable, and we can change the programming through that to recognize what we do take in, how we process it. Is it, from a Taoist perspective, is it desirable or undesirable. And if it's undesirable, then what do we do with it?
Mm.
If it's desirable, then what do we do with it? It's same
Mhm.
questions. And yet they often lead. It's like and this just occurred to me in the um, Jewish tradition, the Hasidic or Kabbalah, that there's the 72 names of God, right? 36, um, what do they call them? 36 greater, 36 lesser,
Okay,
right?
I was not aware.
And so these are some of the internal teachings in that namage or that nomenclature. There's the greater and the lesser, so we may see them as angels and demons, and yet in effect they are both leading us toward the one, that being that the greater kind of gives the memo and the lesser tests to see if you got it. And both this, even in the yin and yang, right, it's all part of that one. So how do you see that in reflection? And I suspect you've got some ways that you've worked to integrate that concept at least peripherally in your life, if not at a much deeper level.
So it was at a very much deeper level because I was designing this program whilst volunteering after my strokes. My strokes were the things that allowed me to rebuild my consciousness through neuroplasticity, therefore demonstrating neuroplasticity to be true. I've also demonstrated that pushing yourself out of your comfort zone causes the myelin cables around your neuroleptic systems. Yeah, that becomes stronger. So so I have demonstrated all that because 4 years after my strokes, there was a guy in the town with me. He had 5, I'd had 6. We're not counting yada yada. He was walking he was walking with a frame. I was walking with a stick and a brace on my leg. 6 years later, he was in a wheelchair. I'm walking what appears to be normally. And the reason I can do that is because I go to the gym every day. And so if I stop for more than 2 days, it takes me 5 days to recover.
Hmm.
So the gone.
Oh, an interesting point. I can relate. My wife, she had a stroke in 2008. You can imagine a pianist with a stroke having the right side of her body paralyzed. She couldn't talk for a couple of years. She brought herself back simply by playing every day. She had no physical therapy to speak of beyond that. She just was disciplined every day.
Hmm.
She sat at the piano and she brought herself back with that neuroplasticity that was
Yeah,
capable. Um,
yeah.
we're all capable of doing if we just choose to, right? It's the discipline, it's the perseverance, it's the persistence and tenacity that one has to have to get over the fears of not being able to do it and just go do it.
But the
And
trouble
now today,
is,
you couldn't tell. She
yeah,
sight reads, in classical pieces like you would not believe.
I would believe. And, you know, I'd also believe that she might be dyslexic too, because this ability to continuously create new iterations and improve and improve and improve, this virtuous circle, as it was called in some business terms, that's something I see again and again and again with dyslexic people. So, but right, I went off on a tangent. What question am I answering?
We've been having multiple tangents. So we were on the
Yes.
end, and now let's go to the so.
Okay.
Well, you had three separate, the if, and so, right? So we're on the
Oh,
so.
oh, thank you
Yeah,
very
I'm trying to
much.
keep up with you, man.
Yay! I
You're a hard
tell
one
you,
to keep up
mate, I
with.
tell
So,
you what,
all
this
right.
is a good team effort. Yeah. So, um, for my entire life, until I learned I was dyslexic, people would say to me, Jonathan, this is the situation. And I'd look at them and go, but, 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 10, 15, 20, 30 halos. Like going to a 3D movie without the 3D glasses on, the three cameras slightly out of line.
Sure.
So, and I had genuinely thought that people saw what I saw and were deliberately choosing to be victim. And until very recently, so 2016, so until 2015, I was using a phrase which when you can either step up or you can remove yourself in a way that's somewhat more rude.
Unceremonious.
Yes, unceremonious. What? Yeah, you see, it's the art. So because only about 4 or 5% of the population, or it might be 8% now, are dyslexic, I don't think that brains that have been conditioned in the neurotypical education system have the internal purpose-driven value of one's uniqueness. And I don't think it's an accident, and I think it's got worse so that the younger people are even less able to filter out the crap and tune into the oneness.
Right. Well, I totally agree with you. And it seems that that's been
That's a very dangerous thing to say.
well,
No,
it,
no,
it
I'm
is what it
teasing.
is.
Mm.
And seeing it as it is, what do we do about it? And this, from a question standpoint, why is it that way? Well, when you consider the growth of a global population, right? We start out with the little communities, and then they grow, and then there's regional development, and then there's population density, and how do we manage all of that? And there's a few who place themselves because of their abilities and skills that they've put themselves in a place of managerial responsibility for the rest of us. And so how do they manage that? Well, one method, that the hierarchical way, right, is to have everybody painting inside the lines. And guys like you and me, we don't. Right? We paint outside the lines usually first, right?
Yes.
Or at least we question the lines.
Yeah.
And
Do I accept they? Yeah.
Right, and often find ourselves outside the lines with our creative capacity. You with your programs, with the music, the intro music for the show, right? I'm playing drums. Probably nobody even knows that. But that's another side of me, and able to explore. And I think that many of us are like that. We have multiple, you hear this, pick the one thing, right, and go after that. Well, what if that one thing encompasses multiple activities?
So I don't know if you do this. This is what I've been doing all my life. I see how someone produces a thing, and I don't need to know all the work. It's NLP. It's you truncate the learning. You show me how you got the result. That's all I need to know to take that result and combine it with this. And I, in my head, there's software programs that do this, but mind mapping, it's like 20 tangents or something like that come off, and that I've lost my thread.
20 tangents coming off, and you've got a huge mind map of interconnectedness.
What were we talking about before that? What was the context?
The context was in being able to see things differently and operate life with multiple things.
Yeah, I don't know. I've lost my train completely. Forget it.
I was trying to find the train here in my notes, and I'm not
Nah,
sure.
no.
So
Listen. I don't know what I'm going to say from one moment to the next. So trying to recall it. This is the problem with being dyslexic, is that you have these multiple streams of consciousness and only one mouth.
isn't that a problem?
Yeah.
Right? Because, and I totally agree. When you think about it, you've got 60 to 70,000 thoughts going on in your head, according to modern theory, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you articulate? Right? How do you pick which ones to come out your mouth
Mm.
that will affect those that are around you in some way?
Yeah.
Right? I was looking for a mind map oh, here it is. All right.
Yeah.
There's a perfect
Ooh.
example of what we're talking about. This is the
Yeah.
mind map that I have for the Live and Let Live Foundation, of which I'm executive director of for the
Ooh.
global peace movement. Right. So there's all these kinds of things that we think about. And part of what we were talking about was the way that people are managed, from keeping them inside the lines as opposed
Yes.
to incorporating the diversity. This is why diversity and inclusion today has so much traction, is
Mm.
because those that didn't fit in and are happy that they didn't are now saying, hey, look, we can help too. Just
Mm.
listen to us and maybe things will change.
Yeah.
Right? We're not asking for, these huge, sweeping, destructive changes. That's not who we are. We're very compassionate, considerate,
Pragmatic.
loving,
Mm.
right? And I feel that with you. You really care. That's authentic. That's raw. That's real. And society today has been diminishing that capacity. We have to stand in that place, to be in the moment fully.
Do you have to have experienced trauma? Because look, when you don't have any arms and you're how old was I at the time? A 28-year-old man, you haven't had someone wipe your bum and feed you and wash you. You learn humility
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
damn quickly. Um,
And vice
and
versa for the one who's giving the caregiving too.
Well, yeah, but you see, it's what do you do in those situations? How do you interact? How do you communicate? It's just so it's only because of the things that have happened to or for me that I am now the person I am, and that is one of deliberate thought and intent based on producing a consistent result over. So when did I have my last stroke? 2006. So where are we now? 17 years. So not quite 16 and a half years since I had my last stroke.
We can round
So
up.
yeah. So that is the amount. And building mental maps is a skill that you burn into your visual cortex, presumably, if you run visual simulations.
Mhm.
So I have run thousands and thousands, millions, billions, more than I can conceive of, just a number, some huge number, because I've got 16 different spheres all spinning at the same time, running in perceptual terms. So I only can see it because the stroke slowed my brain down. In that book, The Gift of Dyslexia, it says that visual thinking, which is what you and I do, as opposed to verbal reasoning, which is how all education works. Education says, yeah, it's the narrative.
Mhm.
Um, Basically, that means that maybe at the end of the sentence you know something, but that might mean a load more questions. But it is basically limited to the ability to comprehend speech.
Right.
Um,
Very audio.
vis- Very audio. So visual thinking is, by this book's estimation, between 400 to 2,000 times faster. Now, I read that book 3.5 years after finishing my own book. And in one of the chapters in my own book, I'm trying to understand. I don't understand. And I go, it just seems like I'm using, and the term I use is several orders of magnitude, which I didn't even know what the term meant. I just heard the word, means multiples of 10. Than other people, and I'm just, this is it, it's just I don't think anything of it. I'm just writing it down, and then after the event, then I find out, oh, that's the reason why. So yeah, I think brain trauma can be an opportunity. I know all strokes are different.
Sure.
But I am fundamentally, from your own wife's story, from my own uh, state, I do not accept anything basically as the way it is. You show me what you got, then let me get to work.
Well, yeah, and reality is malleable. It's interesting how you framed, and not just interesting, intriguing how you framed that it slowed you down, right?
Yeah.
And here's the optimal expression, or what is it, the flow, right? The psychology of optimal experience. This allows us to slow down. This is something that we can incorporate, and many do, through meditation practices of the slowing, of the watching of our thoughts, of the observing of self in a very slow manner that allows us then to make better choices as coming out of that. Now, there's another reference that I really like that we don't consider, and for the most part, and that's nothingness, the complete absence, right? This is what we hear, or what we've referred to as the silence, in which the voice of being resides, or in the quiet, in the absence of thinking, and rarely can we get into that place. It's a discipline that can be learned. However, guys like you, it's not a learning, it's just what develops. And granted, there is some learning, right, in the how do you manage this new area of perception, and then what do we do with that? How does it work? Where do we take it? How can we integrate it with others? What are the outstanding benefits that we can recognize, so we can focus on those first, rather than and take that diversity as to how does that complement what we have? How do we do?
So
How do you find that that's in play, or is it? And what do you think we can do to bring it more into play?
okay, so there was an article a friend of mine, a connection, sent to me about how LinkedIn had made dyslexic thinking a skill. So it's listed as one of my skills. I also have it as on the tagline of my profile. So bloody hell. Ask me
Many
again.
different directions. Find one.
Yeah. What was the last thing you asked me? Mentioned?
Do you feel like these things are
Oh yeah, right. Okay. So
okay?
then,
Good.
yeah, so this pulling together of different things that I do. I read a book in 2019, the end of 2019, called Rebel Ideas by Matthew Syed. And that thing I've just described to you, I'm reading this book, Recombinative Innovation. So
That's
recombinative,
interesting. Recognitive,
no, recombinative.
right? That's what I was trying to say. Recombinative, right?
Yes.
New one. So there's a moment of apocalypse, right? And we've had many in this conversation. This is the real joy of having these chats, is they're apocalyptic for you, for me, for the audience, and we all win. So there's
Yeah.
the triple.
Yeah. Oh dear. Um,
So what did you get from that? How did it
so that explained what I'd been doing, and I've been doing it all my life. And I've been doing it without even really thinking about it. It just is what I do. So it's not like I turn on my diversity. It just is. And
so did
so
that understanding of how you are help you to better accentuate?
accentuate is possibly the wrong word that I will sort
I
of
started to say attenuate, but that
no, okay, well the word I'll use is show compassion towards, for, and considerate, because
even better.
I well, I don't know about
You
better,
brought it down
certainly.
into the sensory. I was still in my head in the question.
Yeah,
You
well,
brought it
look,
down into the feeling world.
and yeah, I mean, it's so, man, there's so many things. I reflect. Once I start learning about the way my brain works, I'm reflecting. It's like journaling, but it was all written down for this book purposes.
Sure.
And I reflect that I see things from many different points of view. And I've just written this down. I haven't read this in anyone else's book at this stage. I've just written it down. And everyone around me seems to get so angry, and everyone around me so much wants to show me that their truth is real, screaming their truths at me. And I'm like, but it just isn't. And it took me 18 months. Took me. It takes me more than 18 seconds. I've got a problem. Took me 18 months to shut down my multiple perspectives, inhabit a singular one, and understand what that means for the perception of most people in our societies today.
That's huge.
And I don't know this to be true, but it would seem to me that if you can only see what you can see, and maybe, oh, yeah, maybe I'll get a watch, or I'll, some linear micro improvement. What people experience is what they think it is what they think is, rather.
Right.
So, whereas what I experience is one version that I'm currently experiencing. And if I don't want this one, I choose another one. And
That
that,
kind of neuroplasticity, right? The
well,
choice making.
so here's what I think it is. You take multiple perspectives, they're all happening at the same time. So I operate in the still world, or else I'd bump into things, but
Hmm.
internally, perceptually, and it's not, see, here's the whole thing. I see what other people see. It's not about what's out here, it's about what I do with it in here. And in here it's going like that.
Right.
And so I go, oh, that's why people are so angry. Because for me, reality itself is fluid.
Is it not? I mean, the reality we're now, and this is one that's huge, and thank you for bringing that up, Jonathan, because it, first of all, it gives the understanding of where others see reality from, and that kind of, like I said before, you brought it down with the statement you made, you brought it down into the feeling world. Most of us live from the shoulders up, right? The body's an instrument we don't know how to tune, let alone play in concert with.
Mm.
Right? Those are the feelings, the emotions, the senses that we have of being able to expand and perceive a greater reality, because they're all multiple choices in any moment that can be made in order to how to perceive, how to bring it into yourself. That's not even including where you take it inside and where it can go as a result. Now, how did you find a way to take that information and that understanding of yourself, and do the conversion factor, right? Do the inner and outer, where you found a place where you can find harmony in the chaos, and then bring that exterior world of others into the picture. How did that transpire for you, and what did you find that could be of benefit for those in the same situation?
So I've been in various situations, which is why I can be quite empathic. You've got, injury, accident, loss of parent, blah, 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 quite a few experiences, adoption, all sorts of stuff. So not understanding why, but understanding why, if you know what I mean. People would talk to me and tell me all sorts of things, and I've been mistaken a lot in life. There's a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey, I
I
think
was
it's
thinking about
91.
the
Yeah,
fifth one there. First
I don't know.
understand before being understood.
Well, there's that, but there's the other one, which is to listen compassionately, respond emotionally. So for 46 years or 35 years, people have been going to me, Jonathan, this is the problem, and I've been going but, and each one of those buts for me is just another idea, but for them is their entire perception of reality. I can't go but to what you've just told me is truth for you, but I didn't learn that. And even now I know it, it's so difficult for me to shut up that I limit my exposure to them, because I feel their pain and I can no longer be irritated at them for being lackeys and ill-contents. They are doing the best they can with the system they're running. So in answer to the question, my backdrop, potency.world, is a new education design, but it's not just that. It's a business transformation. It's a social life and work-life balance proposition, and it is an entire shunt of multiple systems at multiple levels, all at the same time, so that the result it produces is so significant that the needle actually shifts. So that
Sounds
is
like that
how.
might be a perfect complement for the work that we're doing with Live and Let Live.
That's
And
why we're talking.
yeah, absolutely. And this is how it happens, right? These are the
Yeah,
things we explore. We
because
reach
it was
out.
Janine, wasn't it, who put me in touch with you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So she goes, yeah, this is a guy Zen's gonna like. Oh, I forgot to say at the beginning, by the way, namaste, and I thought I'd return with a okay, voluptatem ut serve, which means it's a pleasure to serve.
Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah,
Sounds
yeah. And then I've got one other thing if you'd like, but we can save that till the wrap up if
well,
you like.
sure. Now, was that Latin?
That was Latin, yeah.
Okay. One of the I love in Latin is vocatus atque non vocatus deus aderet. And it
Ooh.
means invoked or not invoked, the gods are watching. And because they do, there are these little tasty tidbits of connection that can evolve into magnificent productions uh, and have tremendous effect on the world in very positive ways. And that's how I feel this momentum is during this time of, okay, we've had our sequestration, we've had our obsession on self-hygiene, we've had our trauma, we've had all of the things that have built us into who we are now. Now, what do we want to do with it? How can we be who we are truly? I don't think we even know who we are yet, but how can we be that? If God's love, then we're love. right? We're the
Yes.
created of the creator. So if that is energy, it's unqualified, then we choose how to qualify it because we have that creative capacity of what? Free will.
We don't.
You think?
Not even slightly.
All right.
Not even not even you or I.
So how do you, I can see how in some ways, once you make one choice, it eliminates all others, right? And is it possible
Schrodinger's
that
cat.
in that nothingness that I spoke of earlier, that there is a created or a, how can I put it, on an individuated level, kind of like a Vedanta philosophy, right? Where everything, we are all threads of that divine, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
is there a possibility then that that perfected form, fit, and function in the world eliminates all other choices? So that there's this destiny that is floating around at the base of our being that we haven't begun to explore yet. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Well, when you speak about the choice to tune in to what you and I seem to experience, because there's crossover in our discussions and things and references and stuff like that, and you go, oh, okay, I can see this guy's thinking works this way, and that's why we're having a laugh. Yeah, I said to you when I first spoke to you last week, within like 10 minutes I said we're gonna have to speak again. So look, it appears more so with people on various spectra than with more neurotypical brains, if we say it's a spectrum, not binary, but they're leading up to,
Sure.
so
Okay.
leading up to a point I think people are hampered by. Then there's a nudge in the middle who are talked down to, and then there's people at the far end who have never given a fig what people think, and as a result of that are simply single-minded, purposeful, and results oriented. They're the sort that frighten education as it currently stands. So I don't think that existing humans, myself included, um, and I don't believe that the next step in evolution is going to be a necessarily physical manifestation. The last chapter of my, or not chapter, the last section of my book was called A Treatise on the Evolution of Human Consciousness,
Hmm.
because I'd noticed how children glow, and I noticed how dull adults are before I really could accept that I see energy. So my solution is to create new human consciousness, which will, by dint of its ability to be adaptable, collaborative, and nimble, become reproductively successful in the Darwinian, the mutation that meets the situation prevails. Because I think we can all see that we're not slowing down, driving the species and the civilization off a cliff. It's not going to stop. It's going to carry on until even the rich are, maybe they have to get on a rocket and go out of the world. But it's
There
going to
is
get,
a wonderful explanation, and what you're saying, I agree with. It's like a biospiritual evolutionary process. It's internal. And
okay.
there's a Russian academician, speaking of Russians, right? I
Mm,
love, there's so much richness in their culture and people that we've been marginalized uh,
yeah.
from. And we need to embrace that. There's a woman by the name of Valentina Morovna, and she has 2 degrees. She's in biochem and astrophysics, I believe.
Mm,
And Russian Academy, that is the highest Academy of Science title given
Right.
in Russia.
Wow.
So she shared a dissertation that has been called the Global Mutation in Humanity. And what she's done is she's gone through the last 10 years of scientific discoveries about how consciousness and our own spiritual evolutionary process is producing genetically effective results as well, or perhaps that these genes are naturally unpacking because of a different area of space, cosmologically, subtle energy shifts, vibrational shifts, that changes the picture of things, right? And so this is I think it's a 49-minute dissertation, goes into the very things that you and I have been talking about from a scientific standpoint of
How
what
interesting.
are and how she's brought it. So it's huge. It's had almost 1 million views. It was published in 2018.
You have to send me the link if you
I
remember.
will. I will.
Yeah.
And I'll also
Well,
have
this
that below the description, as well as hopefully the link to your book too.
yes, I can send you that by all means. So that's an interesting thing that I'll just two things to just end on from my point of view, and then I'll let you do your show wrap. The first thing is so I saw the actor Jeff Goldblum being interviewed on a chat show in the UK, and he read out this quote at the end of the show, and it really, really resonated with me. And it is the energy frequency with which I live my life. So this is the true joy in life, being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one, being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I'm of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and as long as I live, it is my privilege to do for it what I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die. For the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It's a sort of splendid torch which I've got hold of for the moment. I will make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations.
Wow. Nice spin on Shakespeare too.
It's George Bernard Shaw,
Right.
actually.
Well,
Yeah.
the candle reference.
Oh, is that? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So I'm
so
not that
that
well
comes
read.
from out brief candle. Life has been a poor player who struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury,
What's that
signifying
from then?
nothing.
What's it from? What play is that
Um,
from?
Macbeth, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Love you, man. This has been just an amazing conversation, unlike any I have had so far. Um, obviously, right? You're very unique. And I love you for that. And I know others will too. This is going to be a wonderfully received conversation. And I thank you.
Okay. Oh, I thank you very much for having me. And obviously send me the video
Oh,
because
we will do
yeah,
this necessary, guaranteed, and we'll learn how to work together better in the process.
excellent. Okay, well, I'll shut up and you can do your show close.
All right. And thank you for not shutting up the whole time. It's been a wonderful conversation, and I know our guests have enjoyed it. I sure have. And with
Thank
that,
you.
namaste and
Namaste.
in la quecha la kin. I'm Zen Benefiel, your host for One World. Thank you for One World in a New World. One World's the old show. I talk about reflecting, right? I stepped in the Wayback Machine for a moment, minus Peabody and Sherman. Thank you again for sticking with us. I look forward to seeing you next time. I'm Zen Benefiel, and I'll see you next time.